Good morning, students. I am Savita, lecturer, Government GRICP, Bangalore. In today's session, Unit 4, Session 3, we are going to learn large circles swa, ses or says. We are going to read and understand what are the rules which have to be followed when using these large circles swa, ses and says. So the large circle represents swa, ses or says in a particular word. So what are the learning objectives of this particular session? In this particular session, you are going to understand the rules for using large circles, that is swa, ses or says, and also see the circumstances, the cases where large circles can be used in a shortened outline, which will help you to write the outline speedily and smoothly, so that you will be able to write at a higher speed. That is the main intention of this particular chapter. So let us go to the rule 1. The large circle swa or ses or zes. So what's the first rule? Initially, the large circle swa, ses or says give the sound of swa. What do you mean by that? The double consonant swa is shown only initially, can be used only initially, and it represents swa. The large circle represents swa only at the beginning, initially. It is written with the same motion as you write circle S. So in the previous chapter you learnt how to write circle S, the motion of the circle S, the same motion you are using for last circles. So the last circle represent swa. So look at the examples there. The first example, sweet. So sweet, swa, sweet. Then second example, switch. The third example, swim. The fourth example, swallow. The fifth example, sweetness. So you see that there is a swa in the beginning of each word. So the rule says you have to use the large circle initially only to represent the sound of swa. So that is the rule here. Make sure that you practice lot of words. You search for a lot of words which starts with swa, and you practice each and every word so that you can understand the rule. So that is the first rule. The second rule says medially and finally the large circle represents two S's. What do you mean by two S's? Ses, having a light, heavy or intervening oval E. So it represents only E as an intervening oval between two S. When there is a large circle medially and finally, it represents ses, two S's having a light or heavy or an intervening oval E. It represents the sound of ses, says, zes and ziz. Look at the example. The main feature of the shorthand is when you look at the examples, then you will understand the rules better. You may not understand rule better when explained, but when you apply the example and see from the point of view of example, you will understand the rule. That is a beauty of shorthand. Take up the example. First example, necessary. Look at the word necessary. Necessary. Next example, there is a middle ses here. Next example, possessive. There is two S's in the middle. Third example, necessity. You see two S's there. Next word, causes. You have zes there. Causes. This is final ses. Next example, roses. Roses. You see there is a final zes. Next example, sixes. So sixes represents two ses at the end. The first three examples shows medial large circle, and the last three examples shows final ses circle. That is the final large circles. So you have to practice lot of exercises, lot of words to understand this particular rule. Then you have, if you go to this next rule, when an oval occurs between ses and zes, it is indicated by placing the vowel or the diphthong sign within the large circle and is read between the two consonants. Okay, you have to understand it clear. When you have a large circle, and in that large circle, if there is an intervening vowel or a diphthong, that should be placed inside that large circle and it should be read between the two consonants. So if you take up the example, emphasize. Look at the example, emphasize. You have F size, S and Z. So there is a diphthong I. There's a diphthong I between S and Z, size. So when you have a diphthong between these two S and Z's, you have to write that diphthong inside that large circle. Look at the example written on the slide. Then you have another example, exercise. There is a diphthong between S and Z, exercise. You have to place the diphthong between that particular S and Z. Third example, synopsis. Synopsis, S and Z at the end, and there is a third place oval between synopsis. Cs. Finally, you see it's synopsis. There is a final oval between S and S. So you have to write that oval within that particular large circle. Please take up other examples and practice so that you can understand the rule. Then you have another rule, the rule 4. It says the large circle can also be used to represent two ss in consecutive syllable. To understand this particular rule, you have to know what is a consecutive syllable. When there is the sound of two s's and which joins these two words, you represent that as consecutive syllable. Take up the example, misspell. Look at the word misspell. So there is two s's there, misspell. When you are writing that, you have got two s's there, and to represent misspell, there is two consecutive s's that can be represented by a large circle. You take up the other example, Mississippi. Missis. So there is two s's there. It's in the consecutive syllable. So you have to write that particular sis by writing a large circle. That large circle can be used to represent two s's in a consecutive syllable. So look at the example, misspell, Mississippi, S and S in the middle. You have to represent it by a large circle. You have to practice a lot with different type of words. When you learn these 4 rules, you will be able to learn what is the learner's outcome. You will be able to learn the circumstances where the large circle swa, ses and says is used in a shorthand outline. So where you can use, you can learn. And this particular method can be followed in the Pitman style of shorthand. So you will be able to understand where to use the large circle. The beginning, initially it represents swa, and at the middle and finally it represents the sound of says and ses. This particular chapter has 4 rules, and in the unit 4 you will be able to understand what are the other rules which has to be learnt for using swa. What is the book of reference is to be given at the end of the each slide, and I have mentioned it. It is there. You have to see, and whichever particular material is convenient to you, you can buy it and you can make use of it. Thank you so much.